So it was just a couple weeks ago, I made a video about Meet Kevin, and now unfortunately we have to make another one because I just found out that Kevin, as well as his wife, were both sued in a civil lawsuit just a few weeks ago. Two of their former nannies, Kevin has 7 kids, we'll get into that in a minute. 2 of his former nannies are suing him for many different things, as well as, can't say the word, harassment, can't say that early in this video. YouTube doesn't like that. But there is some harassment allegations in this lawsuit as well. I'll show you that in a minute. So yeah, this case doesn't make him look good. But a couple things I want to point out. Obviously, at this point, these are just allegations between these 2 former nannies. They're the plaintiffs. They're suing Kevin and his wife as well as his company. So Kevin will have his day in court. He'll go before a judge. The judge will decide if he believes these allegations that these plaintiffs are putting forward are true or not. So keep that in mind. And there is some interesting, there's a lot in this particular case about how potentially they're not raising their kids right, but it doesn't look like there is any type of like police investigation or anything like this. This is purely just a civil case at this point. So obviously, Kevin's not in any trouble of going to jail or anything like that. He could just potentially lose a ton of money. So keep that in mind. Now, this is the actual lawsuit right here. The two plaintiffs are Andrea Giebler as well as Skelton. Again, this is all public information. You can look this up. They are 2 former nannies of Meet Kevin and his wife. They're suing the Pathrath organization as well as Kevin Pathrath and Lauren Pathrath for whistleblower retaliation, wrongful termination in violation of public policy, work environment harassment, sexual harassment, failure to prevent harassment, wrongful constructive discharge, intentional infliction of emotional distress, as well as a number of wage issues like overtime, minimum wage, stuff like that, and unfair business practices. Now, a little context with this. If you don't know, Meet Kevin has 7 children. He had 2 sons with his wife. I don't know their exact age. I think they're like 9 and 11 or 12 or something like that. And then a few years ago, Kevin and his wife decided to go the Elon Musk route and have as many kids as possible. Back in early 2023, Kevin decided to have 2 surrogate women. They used in vitro fertilization to get pregnancies from these women. Now, if you know anything about in vitro fertilization, I don't really know all the scientific reason behind this, but it very often produces multiple children. So you're trying for one kid, you'll get twins, triplets, whatever. Years ago, there was Octomom. That lady had 8 kids from one in vitro fertilization session, right? So this very often happens. People know this if they're going to go through this process. And Kevin, in his infinite wisdom, decided to use in vitro fertilization on 2 different surrogate mothers at basically the same time. One of those pregnancies turned out to give him twins, and the other pregnancy just a couple months later gave him triplets. So over the course of just a few months, Kevin went from having 2 kids to 7 kids, and 5 of those kids are babies. So obviously they need round-the-clock help. Kevin and his wife have multiple nannies that are always at their home, apparently, according to this case. So they have multiple nannies that are full-time working for them. And this particular lawsuit is 2 of the nannies claiming, the wage issues as well as the harassment and stuff like that. Now, the first one we're going to take a look at, Andrea Giebler. She was actually fired because of her whistleblower. She was trying to blow the whistle on a lot of things that were happening she wasn't happy about, so she claimed she was fired for that. And then Skelton, who we'll get into later, she actually quit on her own accord, allegedly, because Kevin's wife, Lauren, was making inappropriate sexual comments around her, and it made her very uncomfortable. Those are her allegations, right? Obviously, I'm sure Kevin and his wife say differently, but that's what this lawsuit is about. All right, so the actual lawsuit is 39 pages. We're not going to go over the entire thing, just the really interesting parts, so just keep that in mind. Let's start off in the general allegations part. We're going to take a look at the first plaintiff's allegations first. Both plaintiffs have different allegations, so keep that in mind. So Plaintiff 1, Plaintiff Giebler, was hired on or around May 20th, 2021 in a hybrid role that included both nannying and housekeeping duties, right? At the time of hire, Plaintiff Giebler's hourly rate was $30 per hour. At the time, she cared for defendants' 2 older children, JP and MP. In addition to caring for the children, she was responsible for doing laundry, dishes, cooking. So basically, she was a nanny and housekeeper at the same time. Now, eventually, they had the additional 5 kids, and obviously that made work much, much more difficult than when it was just 2 children that the nanny was helping take care of. So let's go down to part 38, and it says, in May, September, and November 2022, plaintiff Giebler worked 24 hours a day for 1 to 2 weeks at a time, caring for JP and MP while defendants traveled internationally with the children. Right? During her overnight stays, plaintiff was monitored through cameras that were installed in the bedroom. Plaintiff Giebler later learned that all cameras included audio recording capabilities because defendant Lauren told plaintiff Giebler that she loved sitting in the other room or at the Platinum House listening to the nanny's conversation for entertainment. These comments made plaintiff Giebler even more uncomfortable as she felt she was being watched and listened without her consent. When she brought this up to defendants, she was dismissed. At no point did defendants seek plaintiff Giebler's consent. Now, one thing I want to point out is that Kevin lives in the state of California. I also live in the state of California. I've recorded phone calls for a few videos in the past, and I always make sure to let people know that I am recording them because that is the legal requirement in the state. It's a 2-party consent state. Everyone has to know they're being recorded. Now, this is a little different because it's in Kevin's own house. I don't know all the legal ramifications. I'm not claiming to be, an officer of the law or a lawyer. I don't know if what they did is legal there, if they're, recording and listening to these people, to the nannies without their consent. They all know all the conversations. So I'm just pointing that out. I don't know if that's actually legal or not, but let's keep going. So in late 2023 is when Kevin had his additional 5 babies, and that's obviously when it became much harder for the nannies. I believe they hired more nannies to help out. But on part 46, it says, plaintiff Giebler was not afforded meal or rest periods during her employment. From November 2023 to her termination, plaintiff Giebler worked an average of 7 overnight shifts per month, during which she provided 24-hour care for the children in addition to all housekeeping duties. Plaintiff Giebler was paid via Venmo and Zelle during her employment, despite making multiple requests to be put on the books and have payroll taxes taken out and to be paid overtime compensation. This is where it gets really interesting. Plaintiff Giebler made multiple complaints to defendants regarding her concerns about JP and MP, that's Kevin's 2 oldest sons, development and behavioral issues, including their aggressive and violent behavior towards the nannies, the babies, and their struggles with socialization. In November 2023, plaintiff Giebler feared for the safety of the babies because MP expressed aggression towards the babies. Their fear increased when plaintiff Giebler was told by MP that he had dreams of offing the babies. I can't say that word, offing the babies. MP frequently went after the babies with sharp objects and kicked the babies on multiple occasions. That is some pretty inappropriate behavior, to say the least. Again, I do want to point out, all of this is just allegations at this point. This is what the nannies are claiming. I'm sure Kevin hasn't talked about this at all publicly. I'm sure his lawyers would tell him not to talk about it publicly, but Kevin likes to talk anyways. I'm sure he'd say this isn't true, probably. But these are just allegations from the nanny at this point. In February 2024, defendants were notified that the triplets, SP, VP, and JP, who were born via surrogate, were going to be born via emergency C-section, and that the babies had life-threatening issues. Defendants did not go to the hospital. Instead, they went on a date night and returned home inebriated. Defendants went to the hospital the next day to see the triplets for the first time and returned home that same day via their private jet. In February 2024, plaintiff Giebler began caring for defendant's triplets. Plaintiff Giebler continued to work 12 hours per day, 5 to 6 days per week. She was no longer responsible for personal chef duties, rather being transitioned into caring for all the defendant's babies and maintaining the home. So jumping ahead a little further, Kevin has talked about one of his babies had some medical issues and had to stay in the emergency care center for several months after she was born. She was eventually brought home and she had some medical issues that required specialized care. So let's take a look at part 55 where it says, in February 2024, one of the baby triplets, SP, was diagnosed at birth with meconium ileus, a life-threatening bowel obstruction. She received treatment at UC Davis that required a 3-month stay and 3 separate surgeries. When SP was released, she required a feeding tube and specialized care at home. Plaintiff Giebler suffered severe stress and anxiety related to SP's care, given she, along with the other nannies, were not trained professionals and had no previous experience with a G-tube. Plaintiff Giebler expressed request hands-on training from a qualified medical professional due to her lack of experience with G-tube feeding and care. Rather than providing proper instructions, defendants arranged for a brief 10-minute explanation by a family friend who was a retired nurse, and to Plaintiff Giebler's knowledge, not actively licensed to authorize to train caregivers. Defendants failed to offer any formal instruction, written protocols, or emergency procedures related to the G-tube despite inherent risk involved. At no time were comprehensive safety measures or contingency plans discussed or implemented. As a result, Plaintiff Giebler was placed in an unsafe and ill-prepared position, forced to undertake complex medical care without the necessary training or support. In February and March 2024, VP, another one of the triplet babies, was admitted to Ventura Hospital for 2 weeks for a respiratory infection. Following VP's discharge from Ventura Hospital, JP was admitted for a respiratory infection. During that time, defendant Lauren texted Plaintiff Giebler stating her and defendant Kevin were going on a date night. Plaintiff Giebler was instructed to take JP to the emergency room. Defendant Lauren sent Plaintiff Giebler to the emergency room alone on at least 2 separate occasions. Defendant Lauren instructed Plaintiff Giebler to lie to hospital staff and tell them defendant Lauren could not be at the hospital because she had to stay home with the other children. This was false, as defendants had nannies around the clock. Now, if that is true, that is some pretty inappropriate behavior. I don't know why the mother would not want to be in the emergency room with her child with a serious enough issue that he had to go to the emergency room. Now, it talks about the kids having a few other illnesses and the nanny having to take care of them. That's not too interesting, but what's really interesting is part 66. We'll get into that. It says, in addition to the health hazards, Plaintiff Giebler was concerned for the baby's physical safety as a result of MP's escalating violent behavior. Plaintiff Giebler requested that a lock be installed on the nursery door to protect the babies, but her request was dismissed by defendants. This pattern of indifference towards the baby's welfare placed them at continued risk and further contributed to Plaintiff Giebler's unsafe working conditions. Plaintiff Giebler also requested that defendants schedule additional nannies per shift because of the complex and intense care required for the medical fragile babies. Despite Plaintiff Giebler's repeated requests, defendants failed to provide adequate staffing and assistance. So it continues on with Part 69, where it says, throughout Plaintiff Giebler's employment, she was not afforded a legally compliant meal period of at least 30 minutes on or before her 5th hour of work. Plaintiff Giebler was not afforded a second meal period for shifts lasting longer than 10 hours. Throughout Plaintiff Giebler's employment, she was not afforded 10-minute rest breaks for every 4 hours of work or substantial portion thereof. On August 29, 2024, following her complaints related to the health and safety of the children, concerns related to the adequate staffing and training for high-risk medical and caregiving tasks, and failure to pay her all wages, Plaintiff Giebler was terminated. So that's the end of the first argument, the first plaintiff's case. She's claiming, obviously, it was unsafe work conditions, that they weren't taking care of the kids properly, and she was not getting adequate, lunch breaks and stuff, working, 10 plus hours. She mentioned multiple times she was working she was there 24 hours a day to take care of their 7 children, right? And she claims that is why she was terminated on August 29th, and so that's why, obviously, she's bringing up this case. Now, the second case by Michaela Skelton, we'll get into that one now. And that one, in my opinion, is actually even more interesting. I do want to point out, before we go any further, we're going to talk about some sensitive stuff. Obviously, this is not the type of topic that kids should be around, so just keep that in mind if you have any kids in the area or something. This is purely an adult conversation we're going to be having going forward, so keep that in mind. So Plaintiff Skelton's employment. Plaintiff Skelton was hired by the defendants in early June 2024, so after all 5 of the babies were born, she was hired for additional help in a hybrid role that included both nannying and housekeeping duties at a pay rate of $30 per hour. Plaintiff Skelton's primary duty was to care for the babies and to maintain the home. However, she periodically cared for older children, JP and MP. Plaintiff Skelton worked 6 days a week, Monday through Thursday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., as well as Saturday and Sunday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So Plaintiff Skelton brings up many of the cases of not being paid adequately and working overtime that the other plaintiff brought up as well. We're not really going to go over that. What's really interesting is Part 82. Let's take a look at that. It says, throughout her employment, defendant Lauren made sexually explicit comments to Plaintiff Skelton that made her uncomfortable regarding defendant Kevin's uncircumcised penis, sexual fantasies, preferences and positions, and details about her personal sex life with defendant Kevin. That's more information than I ever needed to know about Kevin in my entire life. Plaintiff Skelton told defendant Lauren that those types of conversations made her uncomfortable on multiple occasions. Defendant Lauren dismissed Plaintiff Skelton's complaints and continued to make sexually charged comments almost daily. Defendant Lauren also told Plaintiff Skelton that she needed to keep an eye on her because Plaintiff Skelton was defendant Kevin's type. Plaintiff Skelton's discomfort increased when defendant Lauren started referencing private conversations Plaintiff Skelton had with other nannies, conversations defendant Lauren was not present for. It became apparent that the nannies were being recorded without their knowledge or consent. Again, bringing up what the other nanny in her lawsuit was claiming, it was that they were recording them in their rooms in the house without their knowledge or consent. The same month, Plaintiff Skelton witnessed MP exhibiting violent tendencies. While running around in the kitchen, Plaintiff Skelton noticed he was holding a pair of scissors. Plaintiff Skelton asked him calmly to stop running with scissors for safety reasons. MP looked at Plaintiff Skelton and said, "I am going to stab you." When Plaintiff Skelton brought this to defendant Lauren's attention, defendant Lauren told Plaintiff Skelton not to speak to her son that way. On a separate occasion that same month, Plaintiff Skelton witnessed MP holding a pair of scissors behind CP while making stabbing motions. As soon as Plaintiff Skelton noticed, she quickly intervened and MP ran off. Throughout Plaintiff Skelton's appointment, she was not afforded a legally compliant meal period of at least 30 minutes on or before, just like the other nanny was saying as well. And then it goes on to say, on August 4th, 2024, Plaintiff Skelton resigned her position due to the working conditions, safety concerns, and wage and hour violations. So those are some very interesting allegations that are being brought forth by two of those nannies against both Meet Kevin, his wife, and the company. The sexual part really got to me there. I don't know why you would. I don't know why you There's been a lot of instances, obviously, where men take advantage of women underneath them, under their power, and obviously you shouldn't do that. But it's very unusual that you hear a woman making inappropriate comments like that about her husband to a woman that works for her. That seems a bit off. And then she was like, "Oh, well, you're Kevin's type, so I got to keep an eye on you." That's a bit weird. Now, again, like I said, all of these are allegations. This case was filed, I believe, on the 7th of July. As of right now, they sent the paperwork to Kevin and his wife, I believe, so they have been notified that they have been sued. The actual case will take place, or the start of the case, I believe, will take place in December of this year. So the case isn't really started at this point. Everything takes a while in civil lawsuits. But that is a very interesting case. A lot of allegations there about how Kevin and his wife apparently, allegedly, according to the nannies that got fired, they're not taking very good care of their kids, they're not paying adequate wages, they're making inappropriate sexual comments. But let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Obviously, I've followed Kevin for a long time. I've covered him many times. I'm going to be following this case. If there are any further developments, I'll make a video about that as well. But let me know in the comments below what you think about this.